Have you ever felt that indescribable rage when someone, possibly a friend or a random guy on the internet, says something so unbelievably stupid about your favourite franchise, character, or media? Well, I have. In fact, every day I must resist the urge to go nuclear when I see YouTube shorts peddling straight up lies. Batman's right arm is not bigger than his left, Harley Quinn was never pregnant, and for the love of God, please don't look me in the eye and tell me you think Arkham Origins isn't canon. We actually covered all of those myths and dispelled them in an older video which I'll link down below, and today we're making our grand return to dispel some of the biggest, most echoed lies surrounding my beloved Arkham series. So let's start with one that's quite close to home, common myths surrounding the amazing CGI trailers that have come out over the years. So here's one I've seen other channels just be confidently wrong about, even very recently. But rather than whining in the comments like I should have done, I thought I'd get on my soapbox here. The misconception is that a good majority of the amazing CGI trailers for the Arkham games are canon, and well, they're not. Starting with Arkham City's Hugo Strange trailer. This one is probably the most memorable. It shows how Strange had been watching Batman for months and learning his every move before capturing him. He ultimately ends up sending a squad of Tiger Guards after the Bat in an attempt to take him down. The issue is, Strange knows they can't win, something the soldier he's interrogating for information realises all too late. This trailer is iconic, and thankfully it's also canon, fully. We know from Arkham City stories that Strange had been learning everything he could about Batman prior to the game, which leads him to finding his identity out and subsequently trapping him in Arkham City. We also know the guard Strange kills in the chair is definitely really dead, because if we head to the processing unit in Arkham City, we can actually find the guy's body, proving that, without a shadow of a doubt, this is canon. Now this is one that really annoys me. The next trailer I see so many people incorrectly state as being canon is the official Arkham Origins trailer. You know the one I'm talking about. The one where Deathstroke shows up and then Deadshot breaks up the party and there's a big fight and then Black Mask shows up. It's a great trailer and yeah, this isn't canon, like, at all. It just does not line up with anything. Batman doesn't first fight Slade until they meet for the first time on the final offer, something confirmed in Arkham Knight. There's a line where Deathstroke refers to Batman doing some damage the quote-unquote first time they met, which is an obvious reference to that fight, given that he really wasn't given the opportunity to do much damage in the trailer fight, with Deadshot breaking it up.
You did some damage the first time we met. I'm looking forward to paying you back.
So, with Deathstroke sorted, the rest of the trailer just kind of kills itself for us. Deadshot falls into that same category though. He hadn't met Batman prior to this and was nothing more than a hired gun. One of the things I see people point towards is the fact there are actually shell casings and a rifle left here on Pioneer's Bridge, in the same spot Deadshot fires from. But if Batman never fought Deathstroke in canon, why would Deadshot be here to begin with? There are even more reasons this trailer can't be canon. The first one being, why would Deadshot leave his rifle and bullets here? It seems a little odd, and it isn't something we see in the trailer when Batman finds the bullet casing he ultimately drops off the bridge. Maybe it was just a common point for him to fire from, or maybe, and most likely, it's simply a nod to the trailer. I mean, it isn't unheard of for references to non-canon material to appear in the Arkham games, so in my opinion, this is most likely. And my favourite reason this trailer isn't canon, and a reason that no one ever seems to mention when discussing this, the shipping yard Batman and Deathstroke fight in does not exist. I know, it's hilarious, but if we stand where Deadshot would have stood and look at where he'd have fired, it isn't even the same yard. Not only is it infinitely smaller, not being large enough for Batman and Deathstroke to move as far as they do in the fight, but it also has not got a blown up warehouse near it, and has nowhere near the same amount of shipping containers. So, like, if you genuinely believe this is canon, you have to jump through so many loopholes, lore discrepancies, and in my humble opinion be downright blind to even have a sniff of a chance of making this canon. We also see in the trailer that this entire sequence happens on Christmas night / Christmas morning, not Christmas Eve, which is when Batman fights Deathstroke on the final offer, further driving home this point. the game actually only transitions to Christmas morning upon making your way to the Gotham Merchant's Bank to find Black Mask, who ultimately reveals himself to be the Joker.
It's midnight, huh? I just wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas. You too.
So, with that all being said, this is simply a trailer made to show off some characters and get people hyped for the game, which is exactly what it did, because it's still spoken about to this day for so many reasons. It's visually beautiful, it sets up the premise of the game so well, and it features one of the best hand-to-hand fight scenes in Batman's entire on-screen history. Then we have the little TV spot trailer for Arkham Origins, which I'm going to rule as about 75% canon. Bruce being punched throughout his life is definitely canon, but the short exchange between himself and Bane totally isn't. If we look at the surroundings of this exchange, we can actually see the shipping containers behind them, and as we know, Bane and Batman never fought near shipping containers, so once again, this trailer is merely to set up the game and show us the journey of Bruce becoming Batman. The next trailer is one that I absolutely love. It's my favourite trailer for anything ever. It's the iconic Father to Son trailer. This trailer for Arkham Knight is probably my outright favourite. In fact, no, it's definitely my outright favourite, and genuinely might be one of my favourite bits of Batman media ever. I think it's that good. This trailer, again, for one glaring reason, cannot be canon. This reason is the suit. We know Batman doesn't get the V8 until the events of Arkham Knight, because we see him put it on for the first time. And we also know the events of this trailer do not happen in-game. We literally see every single moment Bruce spends in the V8 suit. He wears it for one night, that night being the night of the event of Batman Arkham Knight, and like an untrustworthy wife watching her husband on their wedding day, Bruce does not leave our sight while wearing that suit. So, by using some common sense, we can deduce this trailer doesn't actually happen, and thus is non-canon, which is a massive shame because it's so good and so emotional. Alas, let's move on to the last trailer. Finally, I don't really know why I put this in here, but I feel like I needed to mention it, the Arkham Shadow trailer. I don't really think I need to delve too far into this, if at all, but it isn't canon, and I don't think that's ever been argued. With all of that out of the way and having got that all off my chest, let's move on. Although Jason Todd might not have actually existed until the fourth entry into the Arkham series, his presence was large enough to spark discussion on just where the Clown Prince of Crime held the second Boy Wonder while brainwashing him into hating the Dark Knight. We know that, according to Jason himself, he was held in an abandoned wing of Arkham Asylum until, according to the comic Batman Arkham Knight Genesis, he'd ultimately escape on the night of Joker's riot during the events of the Arkham Asylum game, thanks to help from Deathstroke. Genesis also shows us that he was most certainly underground, with Jason actively having to break the floor to get to the room he was held in, right underneath the nose of Batman. This is also mentioned in a story in Arkham Knight, further proving that he was definitely in an abandoned area of Arkham, an area so abandoned and so dilapidated it was ultimately paved over and completely covered up. However, since Arkham is never cut and dry, Arkham VR shows us that Jason was very clearly in the medical facility, and more specifically in a corner of the sanatorium. For years, and still now amongst casual fans, this is widely accepted as the place Jason was killed, but no. If we put on our thinking caps, and again use some common sense, we can rule this place out as Jason's final destination pretty damn easily. Jason mentions an abandoned wing, and we can see in the events of Arkham Asylum, this place, neither the medical facility nor the sanatorium specifically, is abandoned at all. In fact, it's still in active use when we get there, let alone whenever Jason was shot by the Joker. The most likely solution to solve this myth is that the whole video we see in Arkham VR is simply just reusing assets from Knight, and given the only two rooms of Arkham Asylum we see in Knight are the main hall and the sanatorium, reusing the sanatorium made the most sense out of the two. Still, not much sense, but more sense than having Joker kill Jason in the middle of the main hall. We never actually get to see the room he was held in or shot in outside of the comics, but we can simply put this down to the game not wanting to explore this any further than it had to be, which does kind of suck, but also, we only had one game to explore Jason's past, and as much as this was disappointing, at least we've dispelled this myth and can move on. While scrolling through Arkham forums, you might see people claim that the Matter of Family DLC in Batman Arkham Knight is actually wrong and contradicts its own game's lore. This is because of the inclusion of Tim Drake as Robin, choosing to use the third Boy Wonder over the second, Jason Todd. Well, on paper this does seem correct. We know Jason was Robin sometime before Asylum, but you want to know what also happened before the events of Arkham Asylum? Jason was kidnapped, and a few months later, Tim Drake took up the mantle. Now, we're diving into territory which is kind of uncharted, that territory being the ever-confusing Arkham timeline. But if we assume that Jason was kidnapped at least 6 months before Arkham Asylum, and we know for a fact that Matter of Family takes place 2 months before Asylum, that would mean that at a minimum, Tim would have been Robin for at least a couple of months during the time this DLC takes place. We know Jason was imprisoned and ultimately missing for a long time. Now, whether it was long enough to justify a Robin replacement is up for debate, but what we do know is this replacement time can't have been long. Joker seemingly told Jason he was already replaced and showed him a picture to prove it, and although Jason's concept of time would have been very skewed due to being hidden in the darkness under Arkham, he knows it can't have been long before Tim came onto the scene. Now, although we don't know exactly when Tim was instated as Robin, we know that it can't have been long after Bruce assumed Jason was dead, due to Jason questioning the time period in Arkham Knight when he asks Bruce if he replaced him after a month or a week. So this lines up and makes sense. A lot of people will see Tim wearing his Arkham Knight suit in the DLC, and simply put this down to Rocksteady not wanting to make Jason a playable character as Robin, or offer up the choice between Tim and Jason. But this can be easily dispelled as them just not wanting to make a new suit for Tim, not refusing to add a Jason suit. Although I think Jason should have been playable in certain aspects of this game, it makes sense that he was never given a Robin suit in the game, and all of the Robin suits went to Tim, as he is the playable Robin, and a casual fan going through this DLC for the first time might not make that connection to who this new mysterious Robin is. It would just make it easier to just make Robin the same one we spent time with in the campaign. So, with that little Robin mess cleaned up, what about some more fourth wall breaking rumours? Believe it or not, bugs, glitches, and quality of life issues plague the Arkham series, and while most of these little issues only happen once every blue moon, unless your name is Batman Arkham Origins, some of them are in plain sight and gain traction as actual in-lore hints. The first one is in Arkham City. After Hugo Strange launches Protocol 10 and begins wiping out the criminals who inhabit his own prison state, Batman leaves the steel mill, and rather than heading straight for the nearest helicopter to find the door code to get into Wonder Tower, he can actually head out into the city and stare, kind of awkwardly, at recently deceased inmates. Some of these recently game-ended criminals have strange, almost creepy textures covering them. They almost look like thugs belonging to a gang formed by one of Batman's rogues, the Scarecrow. Now, I used to really want to believe this as a child, that these were Scarecrow thugs, because that would just be so cool, but much like the Arkham City entity, this only makes sense if you force it to. And yes, that's a Dark Knight Returns reference. No, I will never shut up about this comic. This myth is actually reinforced by a couple of other things in the city though. The first are some green-eyed crows which can appear, similar to the ones we see in Arkham Asylum's nightmare sequences. I prefer to see these crows as nothing more than stylized birds made to increase the atmosphere of this once great city, but that isn't the only thing that almost reinforces this myth. The other thing is actually a lot more up front. If you head to this boat and use the cryptographic sequencer, you can find this little hideout in the bottom of said boat. This belongs to the Scarecrow. We know it does because there's papers which say it does. kind of. These papers are actually delivery papers to Dr. Jonathan Crane, so while he might not own this boat, he definitely used it as a hideout at some point. So, with those two Scarecrow-based things being an artistic choice and an outright Easter egg respectively, we can pretty easily confirm that these thugs are not Scarecrow thugs. But that doesn't answer the question of what they actually are. Well, they're actually perfectly normal, non-Scarecrow thugs. In fact, they're very clearly Joker thugs who just have weirdly applied textures, having the leg texture covering the entire body. I know, that sucks, it isn't as interesting and really breaks the immersion, but also, that's just how it is. The next big quote-unquote lore bug is actually in the next game in the series by release date. It isn't in a story mission, nor is it in DLC, no, it's in a side mission. I know, big shock, Arkham Origins is actually a buggy mess everywhere. So, what is it? Well, you know the Mad Hatter, the little guy in the big hat? During his Arkham Origins side mission, we can actually see that he has no skeleton. That's right, Hatter has no bones. He's just a gelatinous pervert with a green coat and an ankle tag. The rumour is that this version of Jervis Tetch is actually Clayface. Why does this rumour exist? Well, if we zap back to Arkham City and enter Joker's funhouse, if Batman chooses to activate detective mode, we can actually see the Joker also has no skeleton, similar to Jervis Tetch. This was obviously to give a subtle hint to the player that the Joker was actually Clayface in disguise, but in Arkham Origins, it means nothing. Jervis is the real Jervis, and you want to know how I know this? Well, in my hours of playtime in the Batman Arkham Origins pre-alpha, which I obtained by selling my soul to WB Montreal, Hatter does have a skeleton. So it's clear that he had a skeleton to begin with, just not to end with. This is how it happened, this is how we turned Jervis Tetch into a gelatinous paedophile. One of the biggest things people seem to love about the Arkham games is how the first time we ever meet Batman, he's established, and for the most part we skip the origin story. This means we can jump straight into a hardened, veteran Batman who knows everything about his villains and has been doing this job for well over a decade. Well, not really. See, while Arkham Batman definitely does know most of his big rogues and how they work, what's shocking is actually what he doesn't know. For example, while you might assume, judging by the fact we can find Ra's al Ghul's body in Arkham Asylum's mansion morgue, and Ra's being one of the more notable members of Batman's rogues gallery, that Batman has a long and illustrious list of things he knows about the Demon's Head. And perhaps he does, but you know what he doesn't know about? Lazarus. Now, we know from Batman's conversation with Mr. Freeze in Arkham City that he knows Ra's has blood which has a binding enzyme in it, hence why he goes down to find him in the first place. He knows Ra's has been alive for centuries, but seemingly assumes he just, knows how to keep a great fitness regime and track his macros. But after taking him down and discovering that the League of Assassins is operating under Arkham City, he tells Oracle that he needs to do some more research on this quote-unquote Lazarus technology when he's done.
When I'm done here, I'll need to investigate this Lazarus technology further. I told Ra's.
Prior to this, though, he refers to Lazarus as something Ra's calls Lazarus, further inferring he doesn't actually know what it is, only that Ra's had used it for years and was able to bring himself back from the dead. According to the Arkham City comics, some of which are canon, but that's another video for another day, we know that Ra's and Batman only met 4 years prior to the events in Hugo Strange's House of Horrors, so in the grand scheme of things, their past isn't as long as you might assume, even though it takes up nearly half of Bruce's entire career as Batman. So this brings into question a few things, but most importantly, the length of Batman's career and his actual experience level. This is further amplified by the existence of a few notable missions in Batman Arkham Knight. By this point, Bruce had been Batman for about 10 years before hanging up the cape and cowl, and by this point he still hadn't met rogues like Professor Pig or Man-Bat. He'd only fought Firefly and Deathstroke twice in a decade, something confirmed by Linz as he references their last meeting as being on that bridge in Arkham Origins. All of this to say, people need to get comfortable with the idea that Batman Arkham has a very short career, only clocking in at around 10 years before he retires at the end of Arkham Knight. It's a very common misconception that Arkham Batman had a 20-year plus career. After all, he did it all. He went from Dick Grayson to Jason Todd and then to Tim Drake, but this was actually all within a little over a few years. The longest serving Robin is Tim Drake at 3 to 5 years, which is an insanely short amount of time for a Robin to be a Robin, let alone if this is the longest a Robin has served. We also know that as well as Origins, Blackgate, Shadow, Asylum City and Night, he went through a version of Nightfall, a version of The Killing Joke, and it's hinted at in Arkham City that the Long Halloween also happened, and a bunch of other stories also probably occurred. All of this within 10 years. Bruce essentially had an entire life's worth of crime fighting and stories packed, shortened and presented in a 1-decade-long gap, which is kind of crazy and really recontextualizes the entire Arkham timeline. It all comes together to paint a very different picture of Arkham Batman, not a picture of a 2-decade-plus veteran of Gotham City, but as a man who's had a very busy 10 years, and went through so much in that 10 years that it's a miracle he's even alive come Arkham Knight. While moving through the haunting sets of the Panessa movie studios in Batman Arkham Knight, Bruce begins seeing things, those things being the second boy wonder, Jason Todd, who seems to be a reoccurring theme of this video, being tortured and taunted by his old arch nemesis, the Joker. A lot of people in the community seem to believe that every time we see one of these hallucinations, it's a memory being brought to life by fear toxin. However, this isn't the case, and just let me explain why. The final hallucination shows Joker holding a camera, filming the whole ordeal, and the room is surrounded by monitors displaying the quote-unquote death of Jason Todd. You might notice that this is the only hallucination that has a camera, which, to the eagle-eyed and sharp-brained among you, might seem suspicious. After all, if Batman was sent several tapes of Jason being tortured, all of which we relived in the studios, why do we only see a camera in one of them? Well, that's because Joker only sent a singular tape to Batman, the tape of him shooting Jason. This is further drilled home by Arkham VR. Yes, that 40-minute long playable cutscene dream that no one respects. Yeah, that one. It actually holds a replayable version of this tape for Batman to watch, seemingly being kept so he can try to deduce where Jason was being held. If there were more tapes, don't you think Batman would have kept them around too to try and do the same thing, going frame by frame to try and get any information as to Jason's whereabouts? Well, I think that's the case, and I think that was what Rocksteady intended. You also have to remember, Rocksteady are the kings of the small detail. In Arkham City, the entire Harley Quinn is pregnant theory was debunked with an entirely new pregnancy test box, which tells us that false positives may occur. They aren't afraid to shine a light on the small details, and although this isn't a small one, it is one that went under many people's noses. There's no camera, no screen, nothing in any of these hallucinations, and given Rocksteady's penchant for sweating the small details, it seems pretty cut and dry to me. The only scene Rocksteady wanted us to interpret as being a memory is the final one where Jason is ultimately quote-unquote killed. The others are induced by a mixture of fear toxin and the stress of the night, and maybe, just maybe, an underlying suspicion that perhaps the Arkham Knight is actually his fallen son. And with that comes the end of the video. Let me know any more common Arkham misconceptions for us to disprove. Also, check out the first video we did on Arkham Myths. We covered a lot of the big ones there, and I think you might just learn something. Thank you all for watching, thank you all for the support, I will see you next time, stay safe out there, and goodbye.